Let's talk about 3 questions you can ask that will turn your content into coaching clients. And so before you hit the go live button, before you press send, before you post, these are 3 questions that you want to ask yourself to ensure that your content actually attracts paying coaching clients. Okay. And so we're going to go ahead and dive on into these 3 questions. Okay. Let's go. Okay, and this is actually part of a training that I did in my Kingdom Coaches Sales Academy, which is for Christian coaches who desire to accelerate their sales in their coaching business. Okay, and so the first question you want to ask yourself before you hit that send button, before you go live, before you send that email is, who am I speaking to in that piece of content? And so you want to be really specific in that. So when you actually read it, you're just like, yep, you can immediately call out who that piece of content is for. And so, for example, and I'm going to show you a couple of different examples of how you can be very specific. So instead of you saying, this is for coaches, you can say this is for coaches who are struggling to close sales. So you see the difference in that piece of how I'm talking to someone and I'm being very specific. And so here are some more examples. So instead of saying, I'm speaking to women who need to lose weight, you can say I'm speaking to women over 40 who have tried every diet, but they can't lose that last 15 pounds. You see? Or, you could say I'm speaking to people who are struggling in their marriage, or you could say I'm speaking to wives who feel like roommates with their husbands instead of partners. So once again, the more specific you are when you're calling out who it is that you're speaking to in your content, the more that person that's reading it, they can literally self-identify. They're like, oh, no, that's not me. Yes, that's me. And so for those where it is speaking directly to them and you literally call them out, they're going to continue to actually interact and engage with that content. They're going to start the conversation. They're going to send you the DM. They're going to click on the link. So you just want to make sure that you're super specific. We are not called to serve everybody in our businesses. So it's okay for you to be super specific on who it is that you were talking to in that piece of content. So that is question number 1. Before you hit the send button, ask yourself, who am I speaking to in this piece of content? And once again, the more specific you are, the better. Okay. Question number 2, what decision did I lead them toward in that piece of content? So in other words, what was my call to action? So did you want them to comment, and if you wanted them to comment, was there a specific comment that you wanted them to make? So, was there a specific keyword that you wanted them to comment on? Did you want them to send you a DM? Do you want them to book a call? Do you want them to click on the link and go buy? Do you want them to, sign up for your email list? So once again, when you read that piece of content, what decision did that piece of content lead them to? So in other words, what was the call to action? Be very specific, because once again, and I encourage my clients to only have one call to action in that piece of content. So that way, they know exactly what to do, because when we give people too many options, a confused mind does not buy. So, you want to make sure that you're super specific in what it is that you want them to do. And so, like I said, whether or not you want them to comment, whether or not, and I tell my clients, if there's a specific thing that you want them to comment, then have a specific keyword that you want them to use. So that way, when you see that keyword, they're interested in whatever it is that particular post or that email was about. Once again, or do you want them to DM you? Do you want them to schedule a call with you? Do you want them to actually click on the link and go purchase something? Okay. So that is question number 2. What decision did you lead them toward? So in other words, what was that call to action? Okay. Now, question number 3, what made them feel like you understood them in that piece of content? So when they look at that content, they should be thinking, oh my gosh, she gets it. Like, she understands me. When people engage with your content, you want them to feel something. And so, when you have that piece of content where people feel seen and heard, I'm telling you, your engagement will increase, your DMs will increase, your sales will increase, because once again, those people feel like you're speaking specifically to them. So let's look at a couple of examples of, when someone engages with your content and, they actually feel something. Or once again, you can easily say, this is what made them feel like I understand them. Okay. So these are just a couple more examples. So instead of me saying, communication is important in marriage, that's very generic. But if I say, you've been married for 10 years, you can plan the vacation, but you can't talk to your husband about why, you're no longer having sex. You know what I'm saying? Like, you see how much more specific that is versus just saying communication is important in marriage. Yes, we know that. But when you get more specific, then when someone reads this, they're like, oh my gosh, how does she know? And so that line, that piece of content, literally lets them know, hey, I understand you. You can say something like, you need systems in your business. Yes, we know as business owners, we need systems. But if you say something like, you're making six figures, but you're working 60 hours a week, because everything lives in your head and nobody can help you. Like, you struggle with delegation. Once again, when someone reads that, then they're like, oh my gosh, how does she know? Leadership is challenging. Yes, we know that, but that's very generic. But once again, when you say, women who are ready to lead their team with confidence, then it's way more specific. Like, yeah, how does she know that I want to be a more confident leader? That type of thing. Or, weight loss is hard. So yes, we know weight loss is hard. Or you could say, this is for women in their 40s who are ready to lose the weight and have fun doing it. So not only am I speaking to my women in my 40s who want to lose weight, but they want to have fun doing that. Because when we think about weight loss, that's not always necessarily a fun thing. But, you're letting them know, hey, not only can you lose the weight, but you can have fun in the process. So how powerful is that? So literally, these are three questions that you can ask before you hit that post, before you go live, before you shoot that email off. Ask yourself these three questions. And once again, watch how much more engagement you get with your content. So once again, those three questions, what do I want? Who do I want to speak to today in this piece of content? So who is it? Who's my ideal client? The more specific, the better. What decision did you lead them toward in that piece of content? So what was the call to action? What did you want them to do, as a result of engaging with that piece of content? And then what made them feel like you understand them? So, what's that connecting piece? What is it in that piece of content that really got them to see that, hey, I understand? So now let's take all of this and bring it together. So I'm going to give you an example of a post. And so we're going to literally break this down and we're going to answer these three questions. What do I want? Who do I want to speak to in this piece of content? What decision did I lead them toward? And what made them feel like I understand them? Okay. So I'm going to put up a sample post and you can pause this recording so you can read the post. And then we're literally going to go through and answer these three questions. Once again, when you ask these three questions before you post a piece of content or send an email or go live, and you're able to answer these three, your engagement is going to increase, your leads are going to increase, your sales are going to increase, the conversations are going to increase. So now let's look at this example. Once again, you can pause the screen so that you can read this. And then we're literally going to go through and look at this and we're going to see and answer these three questions. So you can go ahead and pause this and review it. And then we're going to go through and answer the three questions. Okay, now let's go through and answer these three questions. So who did I speak to today in that piece of content? So let's go through, and I want you to answer this question. Like, when you read that piece of content, who was I speaking to in that piece of content? Yes, if you said wives who were feeling disconnected from their husbands. So, you saw that we were talking to wives, you read in that how there was a disconnect. And so you can literally if you want to see like where in that particular post was it that showed this, that I was talking to wives, even though it may not have directly said, hey wives, are you feeling disconnected from your husband? But when you go through and you look at some of the pieces in this particular post, so it says where it shows in this post, and imagine coming home and actually looking forward to being alone with your husband, whose turn is it to pick up the kid? Co-parent. So you see what I'm saying? Like, as you're reading this, you realize that this is a wife that feels disconnected from her husband. And so once again, you were very specific. You were able to tell that it was actually for wives, someone who was married in this piece right here. And once again, there was just a couple of keywords in it that indicated that it was a wife and that there was a disconnect there. Okay. So now, question number 2. What decision did we lead them to? So what was that call to action in this particular post? Yes, if you said that part where it said DM the word connect. So at the end, where does this actually show up in the post? It said, if you're ready to feel like lovers again, not just co-parents, DM connect and I'll send you my guide, so on and so forth. So once again, it was a clear call to action of what the decision that we were leading them to, like what we wanted her to do, what that call to action was. So it was literally DM the word connect. Okay. Now, question number 3. what made them feel like we understood them. So when you go back and you look at that post, like what was it where it was like, oh my gosh, she gets me. She gets me. What were some of those examples? Literally things that were written in the post. What were some of those examples? Perfect. Here were some of those examples. So once again, literally specific descriptions of what they're experiencing and what they're longing for. So there were things like, when I look across when a look across the room meant something. So she was remembering what it felt like for that. Imagine feeling desired to again, not just needed, but desired. And so, there's a clear distinction between someone desiring you and someone needing you. Usually that need can be tied to, I need you to do these certain tasks, but feeling desired, especially as a woman, that's different. And then intimacy and not just managing the household, but, having that nurturing marriage. And so once again, when your ideal client were to read this particular post, then she gets it and she understands that you get it as well, like that you completely and totally understand her. And so I'm telling you, when you ask these three questions, your engagement is going to increase, the conversations are going to increase, your lead generation is going to increase, your sales are going to increase. Literally, this is the type of thing that we do in my Kingdom Coaches Sales Academy, where we create content, where we have sales prompts, where literally we get together and we have those things that increases sales. So in my Kingdom Coaches Sales Academy, we meet weekly. And once again, every week has a particular theme to it. Once again, they have content prompts, they have sales prompts where literally they are designed to help them close more sales. And so I want to invite you to join me in my Kingdom Coaches Sales Academy. And you can actually join us for the first 7 days for free. So go ahead and join us in the Kingdom Coaches Sales Academy, and let's go ahead and increase your sales today.